administrator. And if this is your first time attending our offering, we certainly extend a big welcome. Each month we select a health and wellness topic to present. And if you have attended previously, we welcome you back. Today's topic is Stress Awareness Month, Test Your Knowledge. And today we are first observing that April is Stress Awareness Month. And it is also actually Move More Month, which is another observance that we are promoting, which is a nice pairing when we talk about stress awareness. It's important to promote stress awareness and talk about the causes and the cures. And certainly one cure, one way to address stress and managing stress for our mental and physical health is to look at our physical activity and to try to do more in the way of moving. And it's interesting that one theme for this year is titled Moving More for Our Mental Health. And so our focus is certainly, as always, about addressing our mental and physical health. And today we're taking a different approach to our presentation by offering you an opportunity to be interactive and participate in testing your knowledge about this topic. So what we have done is created a set of questions and created a poll that Ryan will monitor and manage throughout the session. And we will just raise some questions and statements for you to respond to by participating in the WebEx poll. And certainly if you know the answers to the questions, have knowledge about the topic, that's great. That is validation that you're certainly informed about this topic. And if you aren't as familiar with what we will address, then this is really an opportunity, hopefully, for you to learn something new and to take away some information that's helpful. So we invite everyone to certainly use the chat box if you have questions, concerns, any technical challenges. And as we begin to move forward, we want to first offer a test question as we are about to start the WebEx poll. And this first test question is one just asking if you are able to respond to this question using the WebEx poll window that should be showing on your screen at this time. And Brian, if you want to offer any other feedback or share with us what the poll status looks like, appreciate hearing from you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Good morning, everybody. So on the right side of your screen, you should have the polling interface popping up. If you're on a mobile device, you may have to close some other things like minimize the chat to be able to see it, but you can always pull that chat window back up. We've got just a couple seconds left. I can see people are clicking on that poll, confirming that they can respond to it. We've got a couple people who haven't started the poll yet, but this was just that test question. Just to make sure people were able to see the poll interface. You'll be able to still answer all the other questions in the presentation, even if you didn't get a chance to click on that one. If you have any issues with the poll, go ahead and use the chat box to send a message to all panelists, and I'll be able to help troubleshoot any problems that may arise. But Cheryl, it looks like we did get most people were able to answer that. So I think we are good to go ahead and move forward with the rest of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. All right. So if there aren't any questions or concerns entered in the chat, we will get started with our first question. Okay, the first question is stress and anxiety are the same thing. True or false? And we will just give everyone an opportunity to take a couple minutes to respond. And I will mention that the majority of these questions are set up for you to respond true or false. Okay.
Okay, and it looks like we got most of our answers in. I will take just a couple more seconds to let people finish up in case they still need to answer. Right, and Cheryl, it looks like pretty much everybody answered false for that one.
All right. Excellent. Well, the answer is false. So we're off to a great start. And as we talk about stress, we will certainly talk a lot about anxiety too. Stress in general terms is our body's response to a change in environment, and it may be positive or negative. Our body reacts to change in many different ways and responses, such as falling in love, starting a new job, suffering or an unexpected loss. Um, Certainly, there are reactions and responses that touch on physical, mental, and emotional responses. Anxiety is an emotion, and that's characterized by a feeling of apprehension or nervousness or fear. So certainly there is a distinct difference. So great start for everyone. All right, next question. The causes of stress are essentially the same for everyone, true or false?
Okay, and it looks like all the answers are in for that one.
Great. Thank you. And I don't see the results on my screen, Ryan. What are you showing for results?
So for results, it looks like pretty much everybody selected false for this one.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, and certainly the answer is false. So those of you who responded false are right on point. Clearly, something that causes stress for you may not be the same for someone else. And there's so many different causes. And as we touched on, even in the first question, causes of stress may be positive as well as negative. We may spend a lot of time, obviously inappropriately, dealing with negative stressors, as they're called sometimes. And that's important to address, but certainly there may be other positive stressors in our life that are good things happening, but they are certainly a part of that list. And that may vary just depending on individual situations. And clearly, there's so many different kinds of stressors that we might be addressing in our work life. Certainly, there may be some that focus in the workplace as well as in our personal and family life. When we talk about some positive stressors, those can really be helpful and encouraging and positively reinforcing. So it is important that we can hopefully identify some positive stressors. The key certainly for managing stress of any kind, though, is to be aware and to certainly take inventory and to think about what kinds of actions are needed in terms of how to manage and how to cope appropriately. Yeah. Right. Go on. Next question. Being easily annoyed and unusually irritable can be an emotional warning sign of too much stress. True or false?
Okay, it looks like everyone's answered for that one, and I'm going to try to share the results so people can see. But 100% of people selected true for that.
Great job, everyone. Okay, the answer is true. And in addition to unusual irritability, other emotional warning signs that may indicate a need to work on how you handle stress include a short temper and an inability to concentrate. So certainly there is something to be said about, the more stressors, and depending on the degree of or level of severity of the stressors, can have an impact on how we react and respond and 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 try to manage and cope with those stressors. Um, but certainly, this is clearly a sign and symptom for a lot of people who are under a lot of stress. Okay. Next question. Losing weight can be a sign of too much stress. True or false?
Okay, results on that one looks like everyone selected true.
Right. Thank you. All right. Yes, the answer is true. Great responses, everyone. Um, any change in eating patterns, such as a loss of appetite, which may lead to weight loss, or overeating, which might lead to weight gain, can be a sign of stress. And so here again, certainly people have different ways of reacting and responding, but when it comes to eating patterns, clearly those can be different for different people. Other indicators include becoming less active, experiencing more conflicts in relationships, an increase in the use of uh, substances like alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs, maybe ways that people sometimes cope uh, with stress. And obviously, as we identify some of these reactions and responses, then we talk about the negative coping mechanisms versus the positive ones. And those that are not healthy are clearly the ones that we want to try to address and get a handle on. Okay, next question. Chronic stress can contribute to depression. True or false?
Okay, it looks like the majority voted for true on that one.
Thank you, Ryan. All right. Yes, again, good reactions and responses, everyone. This is true. Chronic stress is long-term stress, and such as that caused by traumatic events or miserable living conditions. Untreated chronic stress can certainly contribute to major depressive disorder and a form of intense depression that lasts for long periods and can prevent someone from living a normal life. So clearly this is a serious matter that can develop depending on the longevity and the complexity of someone's situation. Chronic stress also can contribute to physical illnesses, including high blood pressure, heart disease, and obesity, as we touched on and we talked about the patterns of eating. Okay. Great. Next question. Rethinking your expectations may help you cope with stress. True or false?
All right, looks like we got most of our answers in. We'll take just a couple more seconds here. Okay. Looks like the majority voted for true on that one.
Thank you. Yes, and the answer is true. So good job, everyone who responded to that question. One way to cope with stress is certainly to set some realistic goals as it pertains to work life, whether your personal life and then your work life, professional life. Even if that sometimes means lowering expectations a bit. And I think this is where it's really important to consider what's realistic versus what may be ideal or robust in terms of goal setting. It can be even more challenging and frustrating, in fact, if we set goals that are maybe not realistic, that lead to just some disappointment and frustration. And so, taking stock, taking inventory, and certainly when we talk about managing stress, it's all about trying to do something in the way of reacting and responding sooner than later. The sooner you take note and try to make some adjustments, the quicker there may be positive outcomes, and certainly to avoid what we talked about earlier in terms of chronic stress and how that can affect us physically. Other things that can help include accepting that some events are beyond your control, or preparing well for things that may be stressful. So preparation, organization, whether it's preparing for a presentation, a speech, an interview, an important meeting, trying to see change as a challenge instead of a threat. So shifting our thinking is really important, trying to come from a place of positivity and focusing on certainly thinking first and then looking at what actions may follow to reinforce the positives. But being open to change is clearly important. Nutrition, eating properly and sensibly is critical. Getting plenty of rest, sleep, and as we mentioned in the beginning, exercising, physical activity is so key. So all of these self-care activities are key in terms of making a difference when we talk about managing stress and looking at the multi-dimensions that are affected mentally and physically. Okay, next question. Anxiety is always a negative, harmful emotion. True or false?
right, all the answers are in. We were a little more split on that one. Some people voting for true, some people voting for false.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And the answer here is false. And certainly when we talk about anxiety, which is a pretty complex emotion, it's easy to see that we might tend to think about the negativity aspect of it in terms of cause and effect. Because anxiety can certainly make us feel nervous or fearful, may not be enjoyable, but it is a normal and potentially helpful emotion. And so it is important to pause and kind of think about that aspect as well. Mild anxiety can make you more alert and focused on facing challenging or threatening circumstances. So, even as we talk about setting goals and preparing to carry out tasks, whether it's in your professional life or in your personal life, in terms of responsibilities or major happenings, that can certainly cause some anxiety, which is normal and natural to experience to some degree. And it can, as a result, though, perhaps cause you to just try to stay steady the course and face those challenges or even those difficult, problematic, or threatening circumstances in a different way, in a determined way to persevere. And here, certainly, it's important to just touch on the fact that sometimes when we're dealing with anxiety and dealing with difficult situations, to try to get some help, ask for help if needed. And we'll spend a few minutes talking about resources for help at the end as well. But clearly, anxiety can is natural and normal and not all about the negativity that it might cause. Okay, next question. An anxiety disorder can be characterized by which of the following? A sudden uncontrollable attack of terror, an unfounded fear and dread of everyday situations, a fear of saying or doing something that would be embarrassing or humiliating around other people, or the last option is any of the above.
Okay. So we had some who selected single answers and some who selected the any of the above option.
Right, thank you. And the answer is any of the above. Any of those answers are correct. Although anxiety is a normal human emotion, people who experience extreme fear and worry that don't go away may have an anxiety disorder. So, this is where it's important to just try to address the complexity, the severity, the longevity of situations that may be problematic, that could develop into anxiety disorders. Each anxiety disorder has its own specific symptoms. For example, panic disorders cause sudden uncontrollable feelings of terror, and social anxiety disorder involves the fear of being in unfamiliar social situations with expectations of scrutiny by others. And both, though, can also manifest with physical symptoms such as shaking or breaking out in a sweat. So, this touches on how those symptoms and cause and effects can certainly be both mental and physical. And again, though, it's important to recognize and then look at what kinds of actions might need to be taken to address these symptoms and signs and emotions that may develop. Right. Next question. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S. True or false?
All right, let's take just a couple more seconds to get our answers in for this one. Okay, and it looks like answers were split on this one, a little bit for true and a little bit for false.
Well, thank you everyone for responding to that question. And certainly this is one that might not be well known in terms of factual information, but the answer is true. About 40 million American adults, 18 and older, are affected by anxiety disorders each year, and that's about 18% of the adult population. And this is reported from the most recent research and from this study and from this whole question. The source is the WebMD, and so we're appreciative to have taken advantage of offering this as an opportunity to provide information on this topic. We know that certainly we're talking more and more, thankfully, about mental health, mental illness, and as we address the topic of stress as well as anxiety, it really is important to recognize that, unfortunately, there is an increasing number of people that are struggling, and yet part of the challenge is to try to encourage conversations, to raise the awareness, and to identify where people might go for help when they're dealing with problems such as anxiety disorders and other conditions. So again, this is an opportunity to provide a platform where we can address these topics that are really important. Next question. Men are twice as likely as women to have generalized anxiety disorder. True or false?
Okay, we were pretty split on this one as well.
Okay, you're right. And obviously, this is a pretty interesting question. The answer is false. Women are twice as likely as men to be affected by generalized anxiety disorder, which is characterized by at least 6 months of excessive or unrealistic worry over everyday problems. So again, as we identify and provide some research information that's been offered through our source, it is an interesting subject, as well as we look at the gender differences when we address anxiety disorders. And again, if this is something you're not familiar with, then hopefully this is interesting information that you might take away. And last question, I believe. Which of the following is a treatment option for anxiety disorders? So, medication is one, psychotherapy, second one. Third option is both. And the last answer is neither.
Okay, it looks like the majority of participants said both, and we did have some votes for neither.
All right, thank you, Ryan. And the answer is both. So good job for those of you who checked that one. Again, this was obviously an interesting topic when we talk about disorders and address treatment approaches. So this is not necessarily something that is common knowledge, but anxiety disorders can be treated with medication, psychotherapy, or a combination of the two. The primary medications prescribed for anxiety disorders are certain antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs, and sometimes it's called beta blockers to control some physical symptoms. So clearly, we talk about treatment approaches, what's recommended when anxiety disorders are diagnosed. I mean, that is something that certainly needs to be addressed by healthcare professionals. So getting help, getting screened, getting diagnosed, those are the early intervention steps that people certainly might take. And the approaches to treatment obviously will certainly vary too, just depending on individual situations, individuals, and history. But we think that it's important to just kind of recognize as we first identify some areas of concern and disorders like anxiety, that we can provide information that is just good to know in terms of what possibly may happen if people are diagnosed and recommended for treatment. So I want to thank everyone for participating in the poll today. Want to pause before we wrap up to ask if there are any questions, comments that you'd like to enter in the chat. We welcome those. As I mentioned, our source for the questions for today come from the WebMD. And again, we thought this would be an interesting approach to just addressing the topic of stress as well as anxiety, and to invite participation and encourage people to respond to the questions raised. And so again, we thank you for participating and hopefully validating some of the responses that you might have provided to the questions, and perhaps becoming more informed about some areas that perhaps you were not as knowledgeable. Okay. When we talk about resources, certainly in closing, we just want to reinforce in terms of where people may go for help as it relates to health and well-being. We certainly just want to recognize USG Wellbeing Resources and the external EAP vendor provided by the USG, Accenture Health. This PowerPoint presentation will be provided to you. We'll do a follow-up email and survey, and invite your feedback, certainly, when you receive that survey and information. So this information will be included. You don't have to worry about trying to jot down information today. But again, we just always want to take advantage of the opportunity to promote resources that are available. And in closing, certainly want to just offer information on our office, Employee Development and Wellness Services. If you have any follow-up questions or concerns, or would like to inquire about some assistance and support, certainly the information is provided. We invite you to visit our website if you want to check out our offerings and our calendar of events. And our contact information again is provided, and hopefully those of you attending today are familiar with our resources well. If there aren't any questions or concerns, in closing, again, we thank everyone for attending and participating in today's offering. And in closing, we just extend to you a warm wish for you to take good care and enjoy the rest of your day.